Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast. The Timberwolves have officially won 2 games in a row for the first time in what feels like forever. They beat the Blazers by 7 on Wednesday night and 10-32. The Timberwolves played great defense on the Blazers' dynamic backcourt, especially in the first half. We'll break down what they did differently in the adjustments they made in game, as well as what a return for Taurean Prince, a big first quarter for Luka Garza. There's a lot to talk about from this game that went so well for the Wolves. We'll break it all down here on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Thursday, everybody. Happy Victory Thursday. This is the postgame podcast. A big thank you, first of all, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch the show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app if you have a Roku, or an Amazon Fire TV. You can download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app and check out Locked On Wolves and all your other favorite Locked On programs in Minnesota. Of course, the Gophers, Wild, Twins, Vikings, you name it. They've got it at Locked On, or we've got it at Locked On Sports Minnesota. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken. That's with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right, so the Timberwolves took on the Portland Trail Blazers Wednesday. We talked about this on the previous show on Wednesday. The Wolves had been beaten pretty handily by the Blazers. I guess one of the two games was relatively close in Portland about 3 weeks ago. And Damian Lillard dominated things. The Wolves, of course, had recently lost 6 straight games, bounced back with the win over Denver on Monday, a really nice win. And the Timberwolves got Taurean Prince back after he missed 20 games with the shoulder subluxation, which is similar to a dislocation. Missed more time, I think, than anybody thought. They thought he'd only miss a couple of weeks. He finally came back on Wednesday. And, Portland's a team that's came into the game a couple games above 500, likely going to be around the same area as the Wolves. We're not quite halfway through the season, but projecting this out, both teams are probably going to be around 500, give or take a few games. And the Wolves were already 2 games in the hole in the season series against Portland. So it was good to get a win against Portland, good to get a win, period. So I want to break down my biggest takeaway first from this game before we get into some of the additional takeaways. We'll eventually get to individual studs and duds. But my top takeaway from this game was the Timberwolves' defensive game plan against Portland. The last time these teams played, Dame went for, I think, 30-plus in both games. One game, he got to the line 15 times. The other game, it was all about, I think he made 11 threes in that game. So once it was attacking the Wolves, played a little more aggressively in pick and roll coverage in that game, and he attacked. When they played drop, he just drained threes all game. And in this game, the Wolves tried to kind of blend coverages. They started the game by trying to be somewhat aggressive with Rudy Gobert, and then when Rudy hit the bench with a little bit of foul trouble early, the Timberwolves brought Luka Garza in and blitz pick and rolls. They were playing him at the level of the screen, very similar to what they did for much of last season. Maybe not quite as aggressive of a blitz as, say, Jared Vanderbilt and Patrick Beverley often did last season. But Garza was aggressively guarding the ball and then getting back and picking up his man after his man rolled, right? Like he was showing, essentially trapping the ball, getting all the way back, and the Wolves were kind of in rotation, scrambling a bit, but played that coverage really well and at least forced the ball out of Lillard's hands. They forced the ball out of Anfernee Simon's hands. And it was a really impressive. It made sense, right? Like it was a smart decision to do that for the Wolves. And also that sort of coverage. I talked on the podcast the other day on Tuesday's show. I was clamoring for more Nate Knight minutes. I still want more Nate Knight. Garza made sense in this matchup because he's a little bit more mobile in those situations, and I think could get back a little bit more quickly. Now, Luka Garza, 3 years ago, I don't know that we would have said that, but he's dropped some weight. He's a little bit, he knew that to play in the league, he had to be able to switch on at some level. He's still not a great switcher, right? He's not ultra mobile, but he's a little more agile than Nate Knight. He's certainly quicker in recovery than Rudy Gobert to play that high wall coverage and get back. And he did that very well. Garza made a ton of sense for that coverage. And then when Gobert came back in the game, the Timberwolves tried to get back into drop. This is third quarter. I should say in the first half, Simons and Lillard combined to score only 11 points between them. And so the Timberwolves had a 7-point lead at halftime, which actually could have been a little bit bigger than that. And if you'd said that Simons and Lillard would combine for only 11 in the first half, I would have really hoped the Wolves would have been up double digits. But they were up 7 at halftime. And then in the third, with Gobert back on the floor, the Wolves went back into drop coverage, and the Blazers started to eat it alive. And there were some of those same third quarter woes that we've seen the Wolves had so often throughout the season came back. For at one point, the Wolves were like a -6 or so in the third quarter. They ended up only being a -3 for the quarter, and finished strong, which was a good thing, and got back on top by 4 headed to the fourth. But for a minute there, it was pretty dicey because Lillard started to get whatever he wanted. Simons got hot for a brief second. It was still mostly mid-range and in the paint stuff. Lillard got to the line 15 times. Somehow he missed 4 free throws, which he doesn't do very often. But the Wolves still did a good job at the three-point line. I thought they contested threes well throughout the game. Dame was just 2 of 9 from deep for the game. Simons was 1 of 5. And strangely enough, the first half, I mentioned the Wolves were up 7 at the half, despite doing such a good job on Simons and Lillard. But Jeremy Grant had 20 first half points. And then in the third quarter went down with, I think it was a quad contusion. It was questionable to return. He didn't come back until the fourth quarter. So the first half was all Jeremy Grant for Portland. The third quarter was a combination of Lillard and Simons coming to life a little bit. And then the fourth, Jeremy Grant came back, but the Blazers offense actually struggled more in the fourth quarter than they did at all in the first half. And that, again, was the Wolves being aggressive in coverage, a little bit of Garza. And then I thought Rudy was just better in the second half. In terms of affecting shots in the paint. The Wolves scrambled well in the perimeter. And then the other thing they did in the fourth, I almost forgot to mention this. Part of the reason Rudy was so good down low, so good in the restricted area, he finished the game with 3 blocks, and it felt like he altered another 5 to 8 shots, was because the Wolves put Kyle Anderson up on whoever was screening. Anderson was guarding that big. Often it was Nurkic until he fouled out, and then kept Rudy on the back line, and so he guarded whoever was in the corner. And then if the pick and roll, once the pick and roll happened and the roller was going down the paint, again, often Nurkic, it was Eubanks after Nurkic fouled out. Then Gobert would switch with, like, there were a couple times it was Anthony Edwards where they would just they would quickly switch. Ant would pick up the perimeter player in the corner. Rudy would switch onto the roller and could impact either the ball handler getting into the paint against the perimeter defender, or the roller impact that action as well. And, get into the play, use his length, do what Rudy does best. It's a way that Utah kind of has hit him in the past, depending on the situation. And I understand why some people don't like that, but it depends on the opponent, right? You don't have to do that in every game. Not every team has a backcourt like the Blazers do with Simons and Lillard. And so, like, it made sense for Chris Finch to make that adjustment, and it worked. They won the game. Gobert had 17 and 12 and 3 blocks plus 2 steals. So it was a good Gobert game overall, even though if he started slowly, and it kept him out of foul trouble down the stretch. Jaden McDaniels didn't foul out. He had 5 fouls, and his minutes were limited a little bit by that. But it also was a good use of Kyle Anderson, who can, as we've said before, guard multiple positions, basically guard 1 through 5 on some level, and did a really good job in this game defensively. Ant was good on the perimeter too. I was impressed with his defense, and Austin Rivers was active and effective defensively down the stretch too. So I thought Finch pushed the right buttons in this game. Like, for as much flack as he's taken for some of the rotation stuff, timeout management, I think, still needs work at times. So does the rotations. Sometimes they've been bad coming out of timeouts, close late game situations, some of those things that sometimes it's unfair, but other times it is fair on Finch. I thought he handled all of that really well in this game. This was a close game late, and I thought Finch did a great job. Pushed the right buttons. The Wolves are in the right coverages. The right guys are on the floor at the right times for the most part. And, you look up and obviously Cat, no Naz Reid, who's been playing so well. D'Lo only has 9 points on 6 shots in this game. Like Kyle Anderson, only 2 starters scored in double figures. And yet you look up, the Wolves score 113 points. They shoot over 51% from the field. They cause 16 Portland turnovers, all those things. This was a really nice win for Minnesota against a good Portland team. All right, next I want to look at a couple of additional takeaways, things I just mentioned briefly there. I want to dig in a bit deeper on. So we're going to do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to get healthier, but you don't want to compromise taste when you're eating, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. And if you're wondering what makes Built Bars so good, well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. They come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're actually healthy, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box either. For years on this show, we've been talking about ordering your Built bars at Built.com. You could do that still, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with their hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Again, Walmart and Sam's Club. Get your Built bars today. All right, additional takeovers from the Wolves win over the Blazers. Let's talk a little bit about Anthony Edwards, and we'll talk more about him in studs and duds. But this was a good Ant game overall. About midway through, though, I wasn't feeling that way. He came on really strong in the second half. He started the game, I think he was 5 of 15. At one point, he was actually 4 of 14. I think he made his fifth shot was also his 15th shot attempt. So he was 4 of 14, and then he finished the game 7 of 12. So it was much more efficient down the stretch. 3 of 9 outside the arc. He did get to the free throw line 9 times, which has, lately, we talked about this extensively on Tuesday's show. Actually, it was Wednesday's show. I spent some time talking about Ant and Jaden McDaniels. I spent maybe a little more time in McDaniels, but how good Ant has been lately. And I was saying that this recent 10, 11 game stretch, now 12 game stretch, has been every bit as good, if not better, than last March, April, through the playoffs, really, when Edwards came on strong. Remember, the first part of last season, it was a lot like his rookie year. Like, it was a little underwhelming, inefficient, et cetera, lackadaisical defense. And then kind of like early mid-February and into March, all of a sudden, Ant was playing literally like an all-star. It was just too late in the season to actually be an all-star, but he was so good late last season. We hadn't seen that consistently this year. There's been, blips, there's been flashes, but the last dozen or so games, we've gotten that from Anthony Edwards. And this game was a pretty good example of that, in that it wasn't a night where he really had his shot, but he still scored 32 points on 26 shots, not ultra efficient, but not horrific. He was 7 of 9 at the line, 7 rebounds, which again, look at the last dozen games. Only once has he not had 6 or more rebounds in a game. And he's talked about this to the media about how he's realized he can be a good rebounder. He needs to be. I've been talking about this on the show now for over a year. And finally, we've started to see his overall rebound rate, his defensive rebound rate improve. This game's a good example of there were multiple times in this game where you could see Anthony Edwards go track down a defensive board. That never used to happen. It was always waiting for the ball to bounce to him, an opportunistic rebound. There wasn't that, like, he was never crashing down from the perimeter after contesting a shot or guarding someone on the perimeter to grab a board. It was always a lingering, waiting for the outlet pass or sprinting the other way for the dunk. But in this game and over the last dozen or so games, he's been crashing the glass from the perimeter. He's been coming down to try and get those rebounds and support bigs. And that's clearly been a point of emphasis for Finch and the coaching staff and the Timberwolves as a whole. And it's worked. Like, he's been doing that now for several games. And that was very clear in this game. 32 and 7, 3 assists. He did have 3 turnovers. I thought this was a good game for Ant overall. And again, really big down the stretch. When this was a 1-possession game, it was, Lillard was trying to take it over. He made a really tough 3 over Austin Rivers at one point, and Ant just kept answering back. He had a couple of really nice, tough layups in the paint. Missed a monster dunk in the first quarter. That would have been a highlight reel dunk. So it was good to see him being that aggressive. It was really early in the first quarter. He looked a little bit hobbled. Remember, he had that terrible fall last week, almost a week ago now. And it looked to be kind of that same, like his side, his hip, backside area that he was kind of like literally limping early in the game. And it must have had to loosen up a little bit because he was really good. It got better as the game went on in this one. We talked a little about Luka Garza defensively. Offensively, he was really good, especially early. He finished 5 of 5 shooting, 14 points, 2 rebounds in 13 minutes. Garza actually played the least minutes of the 9 Timberwolves that saw the floor. And that's just because he was only playing when Gobert was on the bench, and Gobert played really well, stayed out of foul trouble after those 2 initial quick fouls. But Garza played well too. He committed 4 fouls himself in just 13 minutes, but he played well. 5 of 5 shooting. He hit a couple of tough little baseline jump hooks, a couple nice, one drop step into the paint where he just completely lost his defender, hit an open three from the left wing. Just a really good all around performance from Garza. And he gives you those solid defensive minutes. He's not a great rebounder, but he's physical enough to at least make the other team work, which that's not really the result you're looking for. But with how bad the Wolves have been rebounding the ball, it seems like for years now, that's important to have somebody that's going to give that effort and then have enough touch offensively, or if he does get himself an offensive rebound, he's going to battle and try and go back up and score and has a shot at scoring. They're actually running post-ups for Luka Garza. The Wolves don't run very many post-ups for anybody, even when Towns is healthy. And Garza had 4 or 5 post-ups called for him early in this game, was the hot hand and had a really nice first quarter. So a strong start to the game for him. And that was important when Gobert got into foul trouble because the Wolves actually built a little bit of a lead there. And so that was a lot of that was Garza. The Timberwolves also did a really good job at turning the Blazers over. I mentioned this earlier. They forced 16 turnovers from the Blazers, and I thought that the Timberwolves actually, even though that number's it's high, but it's not crazy high. The Wolves actually turned those turnovers into 22 points, which actually is a little bit. The Blazers forced 15 Wolves turnovers and got 23 points out of it. But still, I thought the Wolves, especially in the first half of this game, did a good job at getting steals and going the other way, getting baskets. The first few Blazers turnovers of the game, it felt like they kind of came. It was like an avalanche early, helped the Wolves build that early 10-point lead, 10-12. I think it got up to 13-point lead early in the game. So that was good opportunistic defense for Minnesota. And then the last thing would really be how aggressive the Wolves were in getting to the line. And I know the Blazers ended up with 42 free throw attempts in this game. So much of that was Dame, 15 of the 42 attempts. Nobody else on Portland's roster had more than 6 free throw attempts. The Timberwolves got 36 free throw attempts of their own and shot them at a similar clip to Portland. And that was vital in this game to hold their own at the line. Each team made 9 3-pointers. Portland was a +5 at the free throw line in terms of makes. And so that meant the Wolves had to shoot the ball well in the paint around the rim, and that's where they made up that difference. The Timberwolves ended up scoring 54 points in the paint versus Portland's 38. But the Timberwolves are typically a pretty good points in the paint team, especially, I know the Blazers have Nurkic. He was obviously in foul trouble and only had 10 and 8 in this game, but they don't have a ton of size. Like Eubanks he's bouncy, but he's not a really big player. He's not really like a strong defender inside or a big time rebounder. So this is a team the Wolves should dominate the paint against, and they did do that. They were +16 in terms of points in the paint. But the free throw rate, to me, was just as important, if not more important, because that's something that Portland's really good at. The Timberwolves have kind of gone back and forth at being good at drawing fouls themselves and kind of a lack of aggressiveness. Like Jaden McDaniels didn't have a great game. He only had 8 points, but he got to the line 5 times. In fact, 4 of the Timberwolves' 5 starters got to the line at least 5 times. Gobert had 7 free throws. Russell had 8. Despite a pretty lackluster game from D'Lo as well, and 9 free throw attempts for Edwards. The bench combined for 7 free throw attempts of their own. Strangely, Jalen Noel didn't have one, but the Wolves were aggressive. They got the Blazers in foul trouble. They got free throw attempts out of it. They fouled out Nurkic. They fouled out Eubanks. They got 5 fouls on Simons. He had 5 fouls early enough that he wasn't on the floor as the Blazers were trying to make that comeback late third, early fourth quarter, and the Wolves somewhat took advantage of that point in time with Simons off the floor. But that was really important for the Wolves to get some of those guys in foul trouble, to get back some of those points at the line that they did give up to Portland. And that to me was a really important key in this game. All right, let's close this thing by talking a little bit about individual studs and duds. We're going to do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools that go beyond resume data. By using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your posts in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications all on one platform. It's time to achieve your goals at the start of 2023. Now is the time to do it. Make that your resolution. The right team member just might help you do that for your business. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com YouTube.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's close the show as we always do on the postgame pod with individual studs and duds. We talked a little bit about Ant. Obviously, he's going to make the stud category in this one. 32, 7, and 3, 11 of 26 shooting, 3 of 9 outside the arc, 7 of 9 at the line, led the Wolves in free throw attempts. He led the starters in individual plus minus with a +8, which was tied for third best on the team. And as I said earlier, like he was a big reason down the stretch for this Wolves win. He didn't shoot the ball well early. Looked a little hobbled early in the game. The jumper was off. He had a smooth looking 3-pointer from deep early, but then his shot just seemed a little flat, a little short. But he battled, and I should have looked this up. How many of his 11 made field goals were in the paint? 3 of them were threes. So he had 8 made 2-pointers. I'd be willing to bet that 6 or 7 of them were in the paint, which is a really good sign, both in terms of shot selection and also his touch around the rim, finishing through contact. Things that he struggles with sometimes, right? For his size and athleticism. We've talked about he can finish at the rim well, like he's good at it, but he should be better. This was one of those games where I thought he fought through a lot of contact, did get to the line 9 times, but was really good overall offensively, and especially late in this game, and really kind of carried the Timberwolves offense down the stretch. Again, nobody else on the Wolves had more than 17 points. Only 2 starters scored in double figures, and Ant scored 32. Nobody for the Wolves scored between 17 and 32 points. And so kudos to Ant for really strong finish to the game. Second stud, I guess it's got to be Rudy Gobert. He had 17 and 12, 6 of 10 shooting. He was quiet early. I think he was like 2 for 2 at halftime, maybe 3 for 3. But got to the line, made his free throws, 5 of 7 at the line, 12 boards, 3 offensive rebounds, 3 blocks, and a couple of steals, only 1 turnover. He did get beat off the dribble a little bit too much in late, kind of mid-third to mid-fourth quarter until the Wolves decided to change that defensive coverage we talked about in the first segment, and Rudy just ended up hanging out in the paint, which is the proper thing to do against a team with ball handlers like Dame and Simons. So I like that. It just is what it is. Like Gobert's still an incredible defensive player, but he's also like 7'2", and he's massive, and he's 30 years old. And like, forever, you would never want him on an island with Damian Lillard, even when he was 27, right? So that's not an indictment on having Rudy Gobert on your team by any means. That's knowing your personnel and putting them in the right position to succeed. And sure enough, Gobert ends up with 3 blocks and a multitude of affected shots in the paint, around the rim, in the restricted area, etc. So I thought he played well overall, besides getting put on skates a couple of times, just being put in a bad situation. But this was a good Rudy game, which was nice to see after some struggles here of late. We saw some nice Ant to Rudy chemistry late in this game too. We saw a little D'Lo to Ant, or D'Lo to Rudy, excuse me. So a good close to this game for Rudy Gobert. I'm actually struggling with the third stud. It's not another starter because D'Lo, Kyle Anderson, Jaden McDaniels. Anderson played well. I thought Jaden McDaniels had some good moments. Actually, so did D'Lo. The lines are not gaudy at all. I'm Taurean Prince, Luka Garza, and Austin Rivers all played well off the bench. I think I'm going to give it to Luka Garza because that first quarter was so good, and it was so important for the Wolves to have that 5-point lead with Rudy in foul trouble, Ant not shooting the ball well. Luka scored, I think, 10 of his 14, if not 12 of his 14 in the first quarter, or maybe it was 10 in the first and 12 in that first stint, just 1 bucket in the second half. But Garza was really, really good early in this game when the Wolves needed it. And that's why he gets that third stud. I know he only played 13 minutes, but this was a good performance from Luka Garza. We also have to shout out Taurean Prince. I mentioned him off the top and then didn't talk about him in the middle like I should have. But Taurean had 11 points in his return, 5 of 6 shooting, 1 of 2 outside the arc, had a really tough layup he made. Actually, his 3-pointer was a really tough kind of step back fadeaway in the right corner. Some nice defensive plays, took a big charge late in the game. Kind of the quintessential Taurean Prince game. Was really, really good. So it was fun to watch him. And also Austin Rivers in 27 minutes led the team with individual plus minus of plus 17, had 7 points and 5 assists, plus 2 steals off the bench. Only attempted 3 shots. All of them were 3-pointers. All were open attempts, made 2 of them. Timely offense, smart offense. One of the better Austin Rivers games we've seen, certainly since that hot stretch he had a couple weeks back, kind of right before and during the first part of that 6-game losing streak. Rivers had been quiet the last couple games, but really strong performance from Rivers too. Duds, I don't know that I really want to name one. I'll give one to D'Lo because the shooting performance was so bad. 1 of 6. He also had a really bad turnover right before halftime. Was it halftime or was it first quarter? Might have been. I think it was first quarter. The Wolves would have been up. I'm pretty sure it was first quarter. They would have been up by 8 at the end of the first, but he threw away an inbounds pass and Portland came back, hit a tough 3 to make it a 5-point game. But there were a couple of those bad turnovers again for D'Lo. Actually, he only had 1. It felt like he had more than the 1. But 9 and 7, 1 of 6 shooting. He did get to the line a little bit. It wasn't, I want to be clear. It wasn't a really bad D'Lo performance. It was just kind of he didn't really come to the party, and they could have used his offense early, kind of middle stages of the game after the Garza bump and before Ant found his shot. But overall, not a bad performance really from anyone on the Wolves side. All right, that's all I have for today here on this game. We'll, of course, have a show Friday morning. We'll look ahead to Friday night's game. Wolves-Clippers, see if the Wolves can sweep. Well, I guess they lost the first game of the homestand, but win 3 straight before they go on the road for a couple of winnable games, try and gain some momentum before going to Houston and Detroit early next week. So Wolves-Clippers Friday night. We'll preview that matchup, see what LA's been up to. We'll talk about a couple of other topics as well on Friday's show. So be sure to tune in. A big thank you to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Now, make your second listen the Game to Game NBA podcast. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.